The Andal Invasions was a migration of the Andals from Essos to Westeros. This took place between 6,000 and 4,000 years before Aegon's landing. The migration was often violent. The old kingdoms of the First Men were destroyed and the children of the forest were pushed back to the north. Sometimes the takeover was more peaceful with intermarriage between the Andals and the First Men, as is the case with House Hightower. The Andals were the first new invaders after the First Men had settled their peace with the children of the forest and lived in harmony with them for almost 4,000 years. They were tall and fair-haired warriors who carried steel weapons and seven-pointed stars of their old gods painted on their bodies, and eventually swept across much of Westeros in the same way the First Men did thousands of years before. The Fingers were the first place the Andals landed, the place that is today known as the Vale. They spread onto the land in waves. The wars between the First Men and the Andals lasted hundreds of years, but eventually the 6 southern realms fell to them. Only the Kings of Winter remained in the north. The Andals burned out all the weirwood groves and slew the children they found in them, believing them abominations, and put the First Men kingdoms in the south to the sword. They created great kingdoms of their own, but this progress was somewhat slow. They expanded to the Iron Islands roughly 2,000 years after their initial invasion. Eventually, with the Andal kings joining forces and extinguishing of House Mud, the House of the Rivers and the Hills, kingdom of the First Men, the Andals were able to invade the north. However, every attack was thrown back by the Krugmen of the Neck or the strong fortifications of Moat Cailin. Eventually, the Andals relented and the north was allowed to remain in peace. One of the major, if largely forgotten, consequences of the invasion is that the children abandoned Westeros and slowly disappeared over the succeeding generations. During and following the Andal invasion, 6 southern kingdoms of Westeros were forged. The Kingdom of the Sky and the Vale, Kingdom of the Rock, the Kingdom of the Reach, the Kingdom of the Iron Islands, the Kingdom of the River, and the Kingdom of the Stormlands. At this time, Dorne was left as a confederate of bickering and feuding states. The Andals introduced writing. Before that, the First Men only used runes for carving on stone. In fact, everything written about the Age of Heroes, the Dawn Age, and the Long Night originates from stories written down by Septon since. They also introduced the Faith of the Seven to Westeros. In their newly raised kingdoms, where it took root, largely extinguished worship of the old gods south of the Neck. A major exception being the Iron Islands, where the native worship of the drowned god was actually adopted by the invading Andals. They also introduced weapons of iron and use of horses in warfare and the concept of chivalry. House Grey Iron, which had ruled the Iron Islands for thousands of years, was also defeated during this time. Andal culture is marked by the strong influence it had on the culture of the Seven Kingdoms. The Andals brought the Faith of the Seven, and with it the warrior tradition of the Knight. The Andals also brought their own language, which became the common tongue of Westeros, even in the north. Almost all of the early history of Westeros was written after the Andal invasions, causing much of what we know about the early histories to have a rather Andal perspective.